How's it going, everybody? This is Tyler Solberg, and this is episode number 25 of the Solberg Performance Podcast. Today, I got a pretty awesome listener or guest with me today. I got Rae from Ladies Who Lift. She coaches online and in person in the Chicagoland area. She's a writer, a content creator. She runs workshops. She's a badass from Philly with green hair, and she just got back from Disney World. So I want to ask you about that before we get into anything else.
Yeah, I did. I just got back from Disney World. What do you want to know?
Yeah. Well, I want to know because I actually was talking to my girlfriend about going there. I went to Disneyland because I live in Arizona. What is it like as an adult? The last time I was there, I was in second grade with my grandpa. So
Disney, I mean, I can't speak to Disneyland, but
yes.
Disney World as an adult is awesome.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an adult who consumes alcohol.
Yes.
We went to Epcot and Animal Kingdom, and I mean, Disney is just so cool. I mean,
sure.
You don't get any more sort of like purposeful than Disney. Like everything you look at, everything you touch is just done with such intention. You're waiting in line. There's so much to look at. They really just create such like an immersive world. And it was really, really, really fun as an adult. I highly recommend going to Disney as an adult with adults.
Yeah. And I think like kind of speaking to your background too, like you went to Columbia College in Chicago, I believe too. So you have a background in media, right? So for you, just seeing the visuals of some of how that's set up was probably a pretty cool thing in itself
totally. Good knowledge by you. Yeah. And I went to Columbia specifically for production design and film. So really like building and decorating sets, and like so much of Disney World is just like set decoration. You go to touch something and you're like, oh my God, that's not real. So yeah, all of that was it's just a feast for the eyes. It's so cool. And I mean, technology wise, things have just come so far. Like rides are not what they used to be. That's like a whole other situation. And it was just such a good time.
Yeah, I saw, did you get to go to then like the Star Wars part of it and stuff too? Like, I think there's like a bar that I saw for that too, I think.
I didn't see that. Epcot is very like space and like technology.
Centric. Yeah.
But there wasn't, I mean, if people know, and if I'm saying this wrong, it might not be, I didn't really see too much Star Wars actually.
Okay.
Lots of like Baby Yoda ears, but beyond that, not too much Star Wars. The Guardians of the Galaxy ride is by far the coolest and best ride I have ever been on. It was like pure joy and pure bliss for like 3 minutes or however long it is.
Yeah, I imagine like how crazy some of that stuff must be, given like all the 4K and all like the 3D stuff now. Because I remember even going in like second grade, I'm like, this is pretty wild. I can't imagine where it's come in the last 10 years or so.
Totally. I mean, a lot of the rides you're hardly moving or like basically not moving. You just have glasses on or like the seats moving. And you really like the Avatar ride made me like sad that I actually can't get on the back of a Banshee and like go through water fountains. Like it was so crazy. You just have like a goofy smile plastered on your face.
Yeah, you get to be a kid again, so to speak.
Yeah, truly. It was so much fun. I can't recommend Disney World enough.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I want to kind of get into a little bit about your background. One of the reels that I went through, I was just kind of doing, as I told Rae before we got into the podcast, was I did kind of a deep dive on our social media. I followed Rae for some time now, probably 3 or 4 years now, I think.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And, I came across a reel that was talking about how you kind of faked your way into the fitness industry. And I thought it was so cool. I get kind of a mix of coaches and people that are listening more for like general population and training purposes or athletes. And I think your story is really cool, regardless of that context. And I was wondering if you maybe share a little bit about your background and how you got into fitness and kind of how you faked your way, quote unquote, into the fitness industry.
Yeah. So I grew up dancing. I danced my whole life. So I was very active growing up. I was very used to using my body. There's a saying that says every dancer dies twice, like essentially because their dance career is relatively short, when you actually die. And that was something I just like didn't want. I'm not like a highly competitive person per se. I never loved
Sure.
like auditioning and stuff like that. So I knew I didn't want to go to school for that, but I did want to be creative. I wanted to do something a little bit more like off the beaten path. I've always really liked creating like things with a team and like something that has a tangible outcome. So like we were just talking about, I went to Columbia College to study film and specifically production design, had the time of my life in school.
Sure.
Columbia is so amazing because it really is almost like a trade school for the arts. Like you are sort of just speed line right into the industry, which I was. And then once I got there, it was, you know, just crazy. If you know anybody who is in film or works on film, you have a minimum of 12-hour days. So if your call time is 6 a.m., you can be expected to be on set until 6 p.m. That doesn't include however long it takes to get there or get home. And oftentimes it goes far beyond these 12 hours. There's plenty of times where you're on hour 13 and like nobody's stopping and you're like,
so you just keep going. And
you're like, am I getting paid for this? Or are we going to stop anytime soon? Like you just really, really, really can't have any sort of life outside of that. And on top of that, it leaves you with just very little room to care for definitely your physical health. And definitely your mental health, but certainly your physical health. You're eating terribly. You are on your feet for all of those hours. You just feel absolutely broken. And that caught up with me really, really quickly. I think I was only a couple years in when, you know, I was starting to get offered more jobs or bigger roles within these jobs. And I was turning them down because I was like,
to protect your own mental health at that point, physical health.
Totally. And I knew that was a really bad sign. You know, that's if you're getting offered higher positions 2 years into your career and you don't want them. I was like, we're going down quick. And it was because I stopped dancing. I was always looking for another outlet to use my body in. And that's when I had started going to the gym. So like while I was going on set, I would go to the gym at like 4 a.m. Like I would make sure that I was at least attempting to make it a priority. And because of that, you know, group fitness classes didn't really ever work for me because I was training at really weird times. And then I was just not really into like follow along workouts or Pilates or anything like that. And it wasn't really until I tried strength training that I really like felt like I found what I was looking for. So I was doing that. And then I got fed up with work, and I happened to be on a show that was like Monday through Friday. They were usually like 6 days a week, but it was Monday through Friday. And I went on Craigslist and I, you know, looked in the wanted ads.
I love it.
Fitness related. Yeah. And I found this ad that was looking for a mat Pilates instructor. And I had never taken mat Pilates, but I was like, how hard can it be? And I like watched some YouTube videos and I went to this, you know, audition, and they hired me, and, you know, I started watching more YouTube videos and I taught these classes.
Just went down that rabbit hole and
you know, just whatever. Acting. And people really liked my classes. So I started to get this like small following at this Pilates class. And then when the show that I was on ended, I sort of had the confidence to go to the gym that I was working out at and be like, can I work here? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. So I started working at that gym, and I was like, you know, doing everything, washing mats and folding towels and checking people in and selling memberships. And eventually I was like, can I train people? And that's when they were like, you actually have to get certified. So that's when I actually got certified. And then, you know, the story goes on from there as to how it built to what it is now. But that is the origin story.
I think that's super cool. And I love it too, because you had all these things, you know, from your dance background too, that were like, if you were going to be someone that was able to fake it in that situation, man, you were probably the best trained person for that situation too. And I think it's really cool too. I think it's a good lesson for anyone listening too, is a lot of us in fitness too, we find our ways into strength training or fitness through a ton of different avenues. And really, it's about finding what you like. And it doesn't matter what your background was in initially. If you love to work with people, you love to train, There's a place here in the fitness industry and there's a niche, and you've obviously built a really big following, based on that. So I'm kind of curious too. So from when you started, right? What are some things that maybe now, kind of in starting your business now, kind of getting the business piece of things? What are some of the things, like if someone wanted to get into personal training or they wanted to start a business, what were some of the things that maybe you didn't know when you started training that you would tell people that are getting started to think about now?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a very big supporter of like just do it, like just
Yeah.
do it, just start. Like I
Yep.
really don't think there's ever going to be a perfect time, scenario,
Love
situation.
that.
Um, but certainly I've had quite a few clients who have become trainers given their
Mhm.
experience with
I've
training.
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what I, tell them is at least at first, I think it's important to sort of look at, and this is more becoming a trainer than starting your own business,
Yeah.
is there is it can be hard. The client acquisition and actually making money as a trainer
Yep.
can be quite hard. And I think that that's a good thing to think about. So
Yep.
at least at first, I encourage my clients to maybe try to work at more of like a big box gym or
Yeah.
like a group fitness situation that
Gotcha.
offers personal training, because you have a built-in community of people, and a built-in sales system that you can
Yep.
really work with and learn from, be it you like that system or you don't.
Yeah.
And I think it gives you the opportunity to really, I mean, I've learned the absolute most about this career and this craft through working with and observing other trainers. And I think it
Yeah.
gives you a really unique opportunity to do that. And again, pick up
Sure.
what you like, what you don't like. And also, especially with group fitness, and group fitness, I was lucky enough to work in a group fitness gym where we were responsible for making our own programs and our own
Yeah.
classes. And
Yep.
that also really gave you the opportunity to explore yourself as a trainer.
Sure.
And,
What's your
and
style? What's your
yeah,
niche? Yep.
totally. What's your style? What's your niche? What do people like about your classes? Because people will come up
Real
after.
time feedback, right? Like if they don't like it, they'll tell you, right? Like people
Right,
won't
right.
show up to the class. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. There's your feedback.
Yeah.
And then from there, something that I learned really quickly, because I was working at not a big box gym, but
Yeah.
more of a gym, is I'll never forget, maybe like 3 or 4 months into training, I asked a trainer who had been there 2 years longer than me what they
Yeah.
were making per client per hour.
Yeah.
And they were making $2 more than I was. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, I am
Yeah.
not going to work here for 2 more years only to make
Yeah.
$2 more an hour.
Sure.
So from there, I think once people have a clientele, once they have a bit more confidence, once they
Yep.
are more solid in their training, I think there's no better way to go to then go work at more of like an independent training gym where then
Yeah.
you
Like
really,
contracting and yep.
mhm, and then you really become responsible to find your own clientele. That gives you the opportunity to build your brand and your identity as a trainer.
Yeah. No
So
doubt.
that was sort of a next step that I took, that I think was again, really essential to what allowed me to, build into what eventually became Ladies Who Lift.
Yeah, and I think that's super cool is talking about going somewhere where you have a mentor, and whether you like what they're teaching you or not, you're being mentored, and then learning the sales systems too. I think like in what we do, some of the times that gets really demonized, like doing the sales and marketing piece. People almost think it's like grimy, but it's like, well, if you want to help people, how the hell are you going to get them in the door if you don't have a sales process? What is, so you create so much content, and whether it's pertaining to training or nutrition or supplementation, and it looks like that's a really big piece of your marketing and you have a really large following. What pieces of advice would you have for people that maybe want to get into content creation and they're thinking about using that as maybe like a way to promote their training? What would you say are some of the things that you focus on and you would like advise other people to, hey, if you want to get people in the door, you want to build a following, I would talk about these things and maybe focus on these aspects of your social media?
Yeah, I think that finding your niche is really important.
Yep.
I think it's really difficult, mass appeal is not a real thing. You're not going to be able to appeal to everybody.
Yeah.
And sort of right off the bat, you know, not even trying to do that is a good thing.
Yeah.
So to niche down and to really understand what your core beliefs are, what your core values are, what you want your core messaging to be, is really important. It's still, I do find, everybody's always surprised when I say this, but I do find content creation still, difficult, intimidating. Anytime I am making something or talking on my stories, I'm nervous about it. Because you really don't ever know how people are receiving that feedback. So, and I've had the experience so many times where it feels like a piece of content flops or whatever, and then one person messages you and is like, hey, this was really meaningful to me. And then that really lets you know that, Instagram can feel like, or content creation in general can really feel like screaming into like an empty void sometimes. And then getting, that little bit of reception of, this means something to me, lets you know what's working. So yeah, niching down, realizing what your core values are and what your main messages are, and, finding creative ways of just kind of saying the same thing over and over and over. And kind of being fearless in that. I think that consistency is huge when it comes to content creation, and finding and putting aside the time to, again, just do it is important.
I think that's important about like what you're saying about just being yourself too, because the right people find you, then it's really apparent. Like, I feel like when I was looking through your social media, it's like you have a very engaged audience. You have like a lot of people that are there because you're unapologetically yourself, about your stances on certain pieces of training or nutrition, or just your approach to your business on how you do things. I think that's really cool. And I think you end up then gaining the community that you want anyways, versus just trying to make things for mass appeal. You end up reaching the right people too. Well, I want to make sure that we go into a little bit. You have so much knowledge. I read about a bunch of your articles on the Ladies Who Lift page that you have. You went into one of them. You went into was glute training. I know that's a big thing for a lot of female clients, even male clients too, are really big on getting into glute training. I was wondering if you'd share a little bit about, hey, say a client walks in the door today and they're like, I have a flat ass. They say they want to get bigger glutes. How would you approach that situation? Maybe from a strength training standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint, what would be the big rocks of going after something like that?
Yeah, I think that the first conversation to have with people is to have them understand that specific goals require specific action. That training for general health and wellness is very different than training for a specific goal. And when it comes to especially any type of body composition change, that nutrition and training are definitely going to be related. So that's like first and foremost, because you really do want to let the client know that, like, a realistic standpoint, that if you can and you can't sort of have your cake and eat it too. That if you want your glutes to grow, that depending on the person's current body composition, that might require them to eat in a caloric surplus. That might require them to gain some weight or put a little bit of extra fat on their body for the eventual goal of actually building more muscle tissue, because that is difficult to do. It's not so easy. So I think that's kind of like first and foremost what you really want a client to understand, and to go into their programming knowing, is that it isn't just the hour that you spend in the gym. It's all of the
everything
hours
that unfolds afterwards.
And you want to make sure that the client is ready to take on that kind of commitment in a realistic way. So I think that's definitely the biggest piece of the puzzle. We could talk about glute training in the gym specifically as well, but most definitely I would say that's the biggest thing that people really need to understand. That sure, we can do as many hip thrusts as you want, but if other pieces aren't in play, it's only going to get you so far.
Sure. And then for you, I guess kind of parlaying off of that, what would be for you when you're looking at what's realistic for most people? What would you say would be like the minimal amount of days you need to train glutes? What are maybe some of the exercises that you use with your clients on those training days? Again, what would be kind of the big rocks of like, now we're moving into the training program piece, how many days per week and what types of movements maybe show up in these programs for clients?
Yeah, so it depends on the starting point and
Yeah.
what the goal is. Some people don't necessarily want like bigger glutes. They just want like a more sculpted look, or they want, their glutes to like be a little bit more lifted. So again, those are kind of like different scenarios. I would say, you could see a difference even just training your glutes and your legs one day a week. I would definitely recommend, if we can get people to train at least 2 days a week. I only train my lower body 2 days a week. I think there's a ton that can be done there. The next thing that people really need to understand is that we can make you the best training program in the world. If you're not executing that program correctly, then there's not much that we can help that with. So the next thing that people need to really focus on is the intent and intensity that they are performing these exercises with. Again, you could say do a hip thrust and 5 different people are going to do those in 5 different ways. And maybe only one person is doing it in a way that's actually going to affect glute growth. So then understanding that you need to work with control, with intensity, with applying progressive overload is the next step. From there, you want to make sure that you're building your clients a well-rounded training program, that you are doing exercises that both live in this knee dominant category. So your squats, your lunges, etc. And your hip hinge category, more of your deadlifts, RDLs. If we want to put hip thrusts in that category, we can. And that, we can do, you can do band work and abduction work and stuff, but it's going to be these bigger, more compound movements that are likely going to build your glutes to the place that you want, more than these 100 rep kickbacks or lateral band walks. And getting people to understand that can be difficult, because so often the exercises that you really like feel aren't always the same that are
more
most
isolation type of exercises. Like the kickbacks or banded walks, things like that, all great pieces, but you're kind of speaking to the piece that, these larger movements are going to be the primary driver, hip thrust, things like that, of creating those results, not just the things you can only feel an immediate, feel the burn type of moment thing.
Right, exactly. And both can be useful. It is useful to get somebody to feel their glutes and to be like, oh, that's what my butt feels like. So I think both can be useful, but that, especially for beginners or people who have spent a lot of time on the internet, it can be difficult to get them to understand that even if you're not, just feeling it in the glutes specifically, that doesn't mean that muscle is not being worked.
Sure. And I think that's an important piece too. It's like, you don't need to just immediately feel that area working, especially when you're in these larger compound movements where it's spread out, over multiple joints too. But I love what you're talking about too, of like using the isolation exercises. They're useful, and they're almost like a teaching tool of just like teaching people how to activate the musculature that's going to be involved in, get into a hip thrust, get into, locking out a deadlift, things like that. I think that's really great.
Yeah, they can be, like you said, great teaching tools. It feels good for people. It's good to have your clients leaving the gym, feeling like they did something, or like they can feel their muscles, especially for people who are more beginners to the gym.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of speaking to some of the misconceptions a lot of people have about glute training, right? It's only the highlight reel of like doing kickbacks and band work and things like that. Talking about maybe women specifically, what are some other misconceptions you see in training? One would be like, hey, like I only have to do like banded work and kickbacks and isolated work like that to grow my glutes. What would maybe be some of the other things that you see show up with clients that you work with? either in online or in person that you kind of run into with clients?
Yeah, I'd say, let me say them out loud so you can remind me if I like get stuck on one for too long.
I got you.
One would be like rep ranges.
Yep.
One is going to be recovery, both like
Okay.
rest periods in the gym and then resting outside of the gym. And
Yep.
another one's going to be cardio.
Okay.
So rep ranges, I think that, I've had people cancel their memberships or stop their training. And when we inquire as to why, they're like, oh, I'm looking for a more hypertrophy based training program. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And I think that, there's so much, and you can see these charts everywhere, right? Like 3 to 6 reps is for strength, 8 to 12 reps is hypertrophy, and 12 to 15 to 20 is endurance. And that's not wrong. There's truth to that. But what is left out of that equation is the fact that all of these rep ranges feed back into one another, and they're all endurance exercises. They're all strength exercises. They're all hypertrophy exercises. And I think a lot of people get so stuck on that idea that they don't give themselves enough time to grow in these other areas that ultimately helps them grow in all of those areas.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really, really big one. You ask somebody to do 5 reps of something and they're like, well, what's that gonna do? And it's like, so much.
They're so used to high rep training, right? Yeah. And they're like, I don't feel the burn. It's like, well, you haven't learned how to put your body under strain yet, with all due respect. It's a whole different tool. Yeah,
definitely. And I do think that that's something that can be difficult to, not feed into, and that a lot of, especially people on the internet, they tend to feed into. So I think that's a really, really big one, especially when training women. Much easier to get men to do 5 reps of something.
Go 5 by 5 heavy, go get it. Yeah.
Totally.
And then you were speaking about rest kind of being that second piece.
Yeah. So, we get a ton of people, in our programs, especially if we are doing more of a max strength based program or a hypertrophy based program, where you're doing like 2 or 3 minutes rest. And they're like, well, what am I supposed to do during these 2-3 minutes? And it's like, nothing. Don't do anything. You just stay.
You just hang out.
Don't do anything. And people really confuse quantity and quality. And they really want to do like more, this idea that more is better, as opposed to just better quality movements are better. And I think that can be a really difficult one, because people don't want to be that person who's looking at their phone on the gym, or they don't like when their heart rate goes down at the gym, because they should be sweating and panting and exhausted. So that's a really big one. And same with rest outside the gym. It's difficult to get somebody to understand that, 5 days a week of training is likely going to be a great amount of days to train. That again, you don't need to go to Barry's boot camp type of class on your rest days. That's not a rest day. That doesn't count. So that's a really big one. What was the last one I said?
Well, I was going to, before we moved on to the last one, I was going to ask about rest, like for having these conversations with clients. So, like you're running into these things with like rest. How do you explain it to a client who's like, hey, I don't want to rest in between. Like, why is this important? What would you say, like in your training? And like, we were talking about like a 5 by 5, what is, for the people that are listening, right? What is kind of the main reason why you have to rest longer in those situations in the first place? And, why would it be important for your training success?
Yeah. So that all starts with a bigger conversation more about progressive overload, which is, for people listening, which is, basically just doing more over time, and how ultimately, making your body sort of climb this ladder of like, hey, we did this, now we need to adapt and level up to this level, is what's actually going to force change upon your body, both in terms of strength and muscle size. So getting them to understand that, and then getting them to understand that they're not going to be able to apply this progressive overload. They're not going to be able to appropriately challenge their body if they are not resting, because they're going to be too exhausted from not resting to pick up a heavier weight or the same weight that they did before. They're only going to be, maybe working their cardiovascular system, but they're not going to be able to train their muscles in an effective way without effective rest.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing too, is I've always talked to clients about that too, is like, look, if you're in the middle of 5x5 and you're on one of the last 2 sets and you can take 30 seconds rest in between and do 5 reps.
Right.
Well, we're probably using the wrong load. I did just remember which the last thing we were going to talk about was cardio. That was the last piece. I did have questions, but I'm like, oh shit, I forgot what she said.
No, this
but
is
it was
why
cardio be the last.
Why we did this. So
yeah.
But yeah, definitely that with rest. And I think what you just said is like a really good example. Like we have these assigned rest periods when we have a program, right? If you don't need the amount of rest that's assigned, that's a pretty good sign that you did not push hard enough on your previous set.
Sure. Yep.
And I think that's a really just like, I think anybody listening can apply that immediately. So I think that's a really great piece of advice. And cardio. I mean, I think people have this large misconception that strength training and lifting weights builds muscle and cardio burns fat, and that those are
like they're two separate things.
Yeah, that those are two separate things. And they're not. As you and I know, they're not. As you and I know, the more muscle you have, the more effective you are going to be at burning fat. I think that people also tend to think that like high intensity interval training is like the key to burning fat. I've had so many clients who are getting amazing results. This is a conversation I was just having earlier today, actually. Getting amazing results via their tuning into their diet, strength training, and maybe just, having them walk more. And they're like, hey, my wedding's in 4 weeks. I think I'd really like to add, 3 high intensity interval training days to my week. And it's like, why? You tell me what you are trying to accomplish in doing that. And it's always, I want to, shed these 5 pounds really quickly. And that's also, while that could be a useful tool, more often than not, that's going to get you into this realm of overtraining.
And you'll be hungrier anyways. So that'll be
you're
a battle you have to fight. Yeah.
Right. You're not going to be able to rest as much. So you're not going to be able to progress in your weights and apply that important progressive overload that we were just talking about. So I think that that's another really large misconception that, cardio is great. I'm not trying to like shit on cardio. But I am trying to dispel the myth that cardio is this successful key to fat burning that other tools also can't help you
accomplish. Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's that high intensity interval training. I feel like people treat it a lot like doing like running, right? Like I feel like most people associate the moment I start running is when I start finally burning fat, not all of the weightlifting you've been doing leading up to this point, the nutritional interventions, things like that. I would like to get into too, because I know we only got an hour. I would love to get into talking about training during pregnancy. I think that's probably one of the things that we haven't talked about enough on this podcast. I'm trying to make sure I get more female guests and people specifically like you that have pre and postnatal certifications that can really speak to that piece. Why is it so important to continue to strength train while you're pregnant? And then maybe after that, we'll go into some of like how training may change through the different phases of pregnancy. So why would it be important to continue strength training and continue being active during pregnancy?
Yeah. Well, for one, you're going to be lifting a pretty heavy load, not just on your belly for the next 9 months, but also until your kid doesn't want to be held anymore. So for the next, 7 years or whatever. And kids are hard to keep up with, they're crazy, running around all over the place. So simply just having a strong body to be able to withstand what pregnancy really asks of your body, not just, definitely in labor, but also just on a day-to-day
everything leading up.
It's really important because as we know, living in the USA, you don't get special privileges quite often. You don't really
Yeah,
get time off. You're
sure.
expected to continue to live your life the way that a non-pregnant person has been living. And,
For
that's
sure.
a whole separate conversation. But the expectation is still there. And in a large way, you don't want to stop living your life the way you had been. So
Yeah.
simply to just have a strong body, to be able to support your body. Maybe you already have kids as you're pregnant. You're going to
Yeah.
have, much more back pain, to have strong glutes and a strong core and strong back muscles to keep you upright. Those are all really important things. And
Yeah.
I've also had, a lot of pregnant clients be like, man, strength training prepared me for labor in ways that I didn't even know was going to happen. I
Yeah.
think that this not even idea, but this, for lack of a better word, idea of like, you're going into the gym and you're really doing something hard and mentally putting yourself through something
Yeah.
mentally putting you through yourself something really difficult translates to when you're actually giving birth.
Sure.
So yeah, and then, of course, it's always easier to recover when you already have a good base of muscle mass,
Yeah.
strength. So the bounce back in terms of your health and fitness is going to be a whole lot easier if you already have something built in there.
I think that makes so much sense. And I think that that kind of speaks to like why people do things like even, and it's not the same thing, but do things like the cold plunges, things like that, right? Like you're doing something on a daily basis that's hard that you maybe don't want to do, but you do it anyways. And I feel like you're right. Probably in that, I can't speak to it. I'm a man, obviously, but for when that day comes around, it seems like, training your body and doing something hard every day would be something to set you up for a moment like that. So that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense to me.
that's certainly been the feedback that I've got. I too have never given birth, but
Yeah.
that certainly
Yeah.
is the feedback that I've gotten from my clients, and
Sure.
especially how much better they feel. I've had a lot of people who maybe didn't train with me during their first pregnancy, but did their second,
Yeah.
and they're like, wow, the way that I was able to feel so much better after giving birth the second time, due to, again, how much stronger they are in their bodies,
Yeah.
was not even comparable to their previous
Sure. Sure.
birth. Yeah.
And I think that's great too, because they can then obviously speak from experience then too, experiencing it in both ways, right? Like training, move, like going into it, not training. So for anyone listening too, how does training change then throughout the different phases of pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously different phases demand different types of training. How does that look like for the clients that you work in? What are some maybe for trainers listening to, maybe some of the important considerations that people should think about when they're training pregnant clients and at different phases?
Yeah. So obviously it's always going to come down to the individual.
Yeah.
Even when somebody's not pregnant, you're always dealing with individual bodies, and it's really important that you're not sort of just putting a blanket over everybody.
Yeah, no doubt.
You're addressing, people on their individual concerns and
Yes.
whatever might be happening. So first and foremost, like, listen to your clients and get to know your clients. Speaking more generally, the first trimester tends to be when a lot of like hormonal changes are happening, and it while your training might not need to look all that different, more often than not, you're going to feel really, really, really different. So the
Sure.
first trimester is where we get a lot of clients whose energy is just all over the place. There's a
Hmm.
lot of nausea, a lot of fatigue. So that's what we're going to get most often in the first trimester. A lot of times when it's somebody's second child, the first trimester is like a lot more rough than the first one. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's, a scientific reason. That's just what I've noticed.
Yeah.
So that's there. So the workouts might be much, much easier,
Yeah.
shorter, or less weight or whatever that is. So getting your clients
Sure.
to understand and know that that likely is going to happen is
Yeah.
kind of like first and foremost.
Sure.
Moving into the second trimester, that's when people sort of get like a nice little boost in energy,
Yeah.
all of those things that we just described from the first trimester start to lessen, and they're feeling a lot better. With that said, other things are starting to happen. So their bellies are starting to grow, and their joints are starting to loosen, and that might really affect things like balance. So
Yes.
doing things where your client is jumping or bouncing on one leg or something like a dynamic step up,
Yeah.
may not be the best thing
Choice.
for
Yeah.
in case they fall or whatever. Second thing is any sort of like front loaded movement. This is another one that's more of like an individual basis, and it's not like a complete no, but you want to really start to get your client to listen and listen to their body and start to understand like the signals that it's giving it. So by front loaded exercises, I don't necessarily mean like a goblet squat or like a front squat. I mean exercises where you're in a prone position. So maybe like a push up or a plank. Diastasis recti is what happens when your abs separate, and diastasis recti is going to happen regardless of how well you train at a certain point in your pregnancy. But by doing things that are front loaded and putting all that downward pressure onto the belly, it can worsen that or quicken that effect. So and similar with like pull down exercises, women can start to experience coning where they notice that their belly is more like making this cone shape. Those are things that you want to inform your client about and have them inform you about if it's happening. So things like pull-ups and lat pull downs may not work so well at that time. I would also say, getting your clients, if somebody's never done strength training before, this isn't the time to teach them how to back squat, it's not.
We're going to get you under the bar today.
If somebody's already great at back squatting and they love it, that's fine to keep going. But I wouldn't say that pregnancy is the best time to introduce like brand new skills to a client. It's better to work with their general basis of knowledge.
Their existing toolbox and kind of work off that.
Third trimester is mostly the same. More so the belly is just going to be so big that you might just have to find more unique modifications. Again, you might feel a little bit of more of a dip in energy, and at a certain point there's going to be like a hard stop where your client's just like, we're done. I can't do this anymore. And that's fine. This is where you might find that your clients can no longer lay down on their back in more supine position for a long period of time. And there's a misconception with that too. I think people think that that's like inherently dangerous, and it's really not. It's mostly that when you lay down, you are putting a lot of pressure on a vein that sends, blood to your head, to your heart. And when you sit up from that, you get like you can get like a really big head rush, and then it's more dangerous, not just to get blood to your baby, but like, again, for getting really dizzy and falling down or something like that. So you want to make your client really aware of all of those things and have them communicate those needs to you. And at a certain point, definitely during the third trimester, it's going to be basic stuff.
I would, so another thing too, that I'm curious about, what are some of the, like maybe some of the unorthodox or more creative things that you've had to do when training clients when they are pregnant, and maybe in that third trimester too, like where they're really showing and you're going to have to get creative with some of the loading schemes and things like that. Do you find that you have to get a little bit more creative, or does it kind of stay the same?
No, I think you definitely have to get a little bit more creative. And again, it sort of depends on like how the client's feeling, their how advanced they already are in their training, their willingness to kind of get creative. Oftentimes a full depth squat becomes really difficult. So you have to do things like a goblet squat. Things like, any sort of press movement is often now done either standing or sitting on an incline or straight up and down. Something like more of a deadlift, or, RDLs are definitely going to get hard at a certain point. So you might do things more like block pull deadlifts or a deadlift from any sort of elevated surface or a rack
Sure.
pull. This might be a great time to utilize machines, find ways for your client to get just more stability
Yeah.
within their exercises, so they don't need to, there's a lot going on that's going to make you unstable, be
Yep.
it hormonally or your joints or just the belly. So
Sure.
this might be a great time to utilize more seated exercises or machine-based
Sure.
exercises where that sort of safety net is already built in.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about from a nutritional standpoint then? So like when you're talking to clients, I'm sure that, women obviously that I've trained and talked to as well, they kind of almost feel like a guilt and a shame around some of the cravings they have during their pregnancy. The ones that want to, they're still in their training and they like, I want to retain, some of my shape. I want to do these things. What is been your role in talking about nutrition with clients that maybe are in different phases of their pregnancy, and what maybe words of wisdom would you offer to them maybe when thinking about like consumption during that period of time?
Yeah, I can only speak to this a little bit because I'm not certified in
Yes.
prenatal nutrition.
Yep.
Um, what I will say is that one of the things that I've really grown to love about training pregnant women is that for so many, it's actually like the first time in their life that they're really able to separate any sort of aesthetic goal with their training goal.
Gotcha.
And what they find is like this newfound appreciation for their body and for their strength. And they really come to like love and focus on exercise in a way that
Yeah.
oftentimes we're trying to get them to all along, but because they are really stepping into this caregiver role from the
Hmm.
jump of now I'm taking care of my body to take care of another body. um
Yeah.
they inherently start to move better, they start to lift better. And I think that's a really really awesome thing that just tends to
Yeah.
happen. And it's a shame that it's a little harder for people to locate without that, because at the end of the day it is the main thing that,
Yes.
pregnant or not, is going to drive whatever progress you're looking for.
Yeah.
So that aside, and then I mean, again, I'm not prenatal certified per se, so I can't really speak to like
For sure.
vitamins or supplementation or anything.
Yep.
I think always getting people to understand that their protein and carb intake is and should be a little bit higher. That eating in a
Yes.
caloric deficit during pregnancy
Not the
is
time.
not the move. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that. Um, and when it comes to cravings and stuff, like it honestly, like if there's ever a time to like give in to those things and kind of have like a fuck it moment,
Yeah.
I'd say that that would be the time.
Sure.
So obviously trying to get people to realize that their nutritional value should be really high. You want to eat a diet that's really full of, lean proteins, complex carbs, starch carbs,
Hmm.
fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, and not eat little, truly
Sure.
eat to fuel your body.
Yeah. And I like what you're talking about too on the end of like they're almost learning because it's not like they're letting their aesthetic go. That's not what it is. Your body's just naturally going through changes throughout the pregnancy. I think it's really cool that you're kind of speaking to. That's almost the time where people like, all right, I'm going to make this a lot less about my aesthetic. I'm going to focus on the function of my body. And in a weird way of what you're talking about, I've had that experience with clients when they get injured. They start finally focusing on function instead of their body composition, and they get out of that. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they're a whole different training client because they've really started to focus on the things that would have driven success for that thing in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And speaking about supplementation, so obviously not pre and postnatal, but supplementation, I'm always interested when I'm talking to coaches about like their personal philosophies around supplementation, maybe some of the things that they're taking, maybe some of the things that their clients are taking. Would you share a little bit about your personal philosophy just around supplementation, just kind of like an overview of like where you're at, what it means to you and the importance of it in maybe training, health, anything as it pertains to that?
Yeah. Again, when it comes to supplementation, unless you have like a much higher degree in nutrition than I do, or you're a registered dietitian,
Sure.
this isn't something that I believe even like legally you're like really supposed to recommend to people. And
Yes.
certainly that's not something I do with clients. I mean, there's
Yep.
certain supplements that I think are just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Protein powder, if we even want to consider that a supplement, I don't really consider
Right.
that a
It's
supplement.
dehydrated food. Yep.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Being one of them, I think creatine is a really misunderstood supplement, but one that like literally your grandma should even be taking, and
Sure.
trying to get clients to, understand that.
Yes.
Beyond that, I personally do take some supplements that have really helped me, but they have been prescribed to me through someone who is certified to do so.
Yeah, like a panel, like you did like a blood panel, or you
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
sat down and
exactly.
talked. Okay, makes
And,
sense.
and to that point, I think that would be a really important thing to, everybody's gone on WebMD and, had cancer,
Right.
right? Like
Yes.
that's
Yes.
everybody.
Or I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. Sir, you're a man.
And like, so I think it really is important to, again, bring down the hype and maybe
Yeah.
spend the money, hire the person to really take a closer look at what's, going on. Go get a
Yeah.
blood panel and have a professional read that,
Sure.
instead of being like, I'm tired every day, I need this supplement.
Yes.
Maybe you do, but maybe your diet sucks. Maybe you're
Yeah.
going to bed, maybe you're sleeping 5 hours a day, maybe you're over.
Sure.
I think people really, if I ever do speak on supplements, it gets such a big response, and it's always
Yeah.
so confusing to me, because it's like, what else are you doing?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
more people need to really rely on lifestyle factors first and foremost before, reaching for the supplements.
Sure. And that's kind of how I talk about it with clients too, is like, look, I don't want to sit, and it's not that like supplements are bad, it's that they're intended to fill the gaps, right? So, until we approached having a conversation about nutrition, about your sleep, your sleep rituals, things like that, your training, your daily
Stress
activity,
levels.
your stress levels, how you manage that, how you cope with that, it's probably not going to be the biggest conversation that is as important to start with. For you, what are some of the supplements? And you kind of talked about creatine. I'd watched some of your reels on that. I thought that was really great and informative. What are some of the misconceptions maybe people have around taking creatine, and maybe what are some of the benefits of doing something like that? And I think everybody that's listening to understands too. We're acting within we're just speaking this from personal experience, not within, hey, we're prescribing this outside of the scope of our practice type of thing. So
Sure.
yeah.
So I think creatine, I don't know how it got this reputation, but like people really do think it is a steroid. Like people really do think that they're going to take creatine and be like, "Huh." And like, that's just not true.
Can't fit through doors anymore,
Like creatine is something that already naturally exists in our bodies. And on top of that, it's something that also exists in a lot of foods that we eat. If you do eat animal-based products, you are consuming creatine. And creatine is mostly just like a little, it's like energy for your body. Creatine helps you produce ATP, which is your body's, sort of main resource for energy production. And it's not necessarily the creatine itself that is going to change your body composition, but it's what the creatine is going to facilitate within your energy systems,
like a catalyst,
to allow you to perform differently. That's going to change your body composition. So, people get really hyped. Like people should get just as excited about creatine as they do about pre-workout.
Yep. I love that. And I think what's cool about creatine too, if you really dive into the research too, it has so many different training applications, right? Even whether it's for just general health, right? It could be for even like looking at brain health, things like that. It's really great for cognition. It's obviously something that, on my side in working with athletes, it's something that's kind of like a mainstay that most people take because it's very helpful. We were talking about those 5x5 sets, repeated bouts of heavy strength exercises, great for that too. Other than creatine, what would you say, or maybe some of the other supplements that you've kind of dove into, and maybe some of the ones that you bought into initially, you tried out and you're like, this isn't really, because we all have that story, right? Like, I think from when we were younger, when we first started training, like, oh, I'm all about this. And then as time went on, you're like, probably should have never been taking that.
I can't even tell you how much money I must have spent on fat burners, which is
Okay.
so stupid. Like I was like best friends with the dude who worked at GNC. And like, of course
Yeah.
I was going in there.
Hook it up. Yeah.
$160 every month on
Yeah.
fat burners. So yeah, any sort of supplement that claims to like burn fat, like just get
It out of here. Yeah.
I think BCAAs are pretty useless. If you are again somebody who gets a sufficient amount of protein, I think that's just expensive flavored, delicious flavored water. If you want to, if it helps you to drink more water, then like go for it.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty useless. I think in my own, I've had a good amount of success with like magnesium in terms of recovery and stress.
Sure.
An omega-3 supplement I think can be really helpful. Those are the ones that I've had, like the most success with, and on the opposite side have had lesser success with, but spent a lot of money on, in that lesson.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into one last thing before I let you go, because I don't want to take you too far past your time. I know you got stuff going on tonight. 2023 didn't start, very long ago, and obviously you're the founder of Ladies Who Lift. And, I think before we get off here, I was kind of curious about like, maybe what are some of the big things you have coming up for you or Ladies Who Lift? Maybe some of the programming or some of the workshops you have coming up, because I want to be able to, for anybody listening, Rae is great at what she does, and I want you to be able to go over and get over and find her work. So what are some of those things for you?
Come work with us.
Yeah.
So what we have existing is we offer these 4 tiers of online training: our member, our leader, our transformer, and our ambassador program.
Sure.
Which higher up the tier that you go, the more one-on-one coaching you're going to receive. So our member program is just $45 a month. It is more of a community level coaching program. We have all of our programs available to do at the gym or at home. So those 4 programs are amazing. It's a really great way to have also like a community of people that you can with. And, a lot of times if you're just talking to your coach, you don't understand that there's 500 other people in this community who are asking the same questions, having the same concerns as you. And I think that accountability and support can be so important. So we have lots of different ways and lots of different, price points that people can work with us on. We also recently just released a good amount of ebooks that are basically this conversation we're having, everything I post on Instagram, just all wrapped up in one. Awesome. I really love those. And I try to, like back to our first conversation, like push those as much as possible, because again, education and having like a solid basis of knowledge is so important. So I think, the fact that we can now offer these downloadable educational resources that you can take all the knowledge that you don't have to go become a certified trainer. Here's what you're going to learn, are something that we really want to have people explore a little bit more. Moving into 2023, again, now that we are in like a post-COVID world, we are offering more workshops and classes. I do live in Chicago, so right now we just have them in the Chicago area. But if people out there listening are also in LA, we also have a coach out there. Then we're just trying to do more classes out there. We are very soon bringing in the next couple of days, bringing a nutrition coach on board. As I talked about, I am nutrition, certified through Precision Nutrition, but that's a very baseline level of nutritional coaching. And there's a much deeper dive that you can do. So we are bringing somebody on board who's going to be able to, let's say people do feel really good with their training. This is a way that you can work with a certified nutrition coach and expert without having to also do our training, which isn't something that we were able to offer before. And then fingers crossed, I would love to open a private training gym in the next year. That is a huge goal of mine. I love training people online, but there's nothing like being able to actually connect with people in person. It's
Sure.
something that I've really missed during this sort of, post-COVID
Yeah,
situation.
kind of learn you like to be around people too.
Yeah, I've been sitting right here all day. And
Yeah.
and I can't, my cat's meow a lot. I gotta get out of here. So
Yeah.
hopefully in the next year, that is going to be something that we are going to do as well.
That's so exciting. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today, and we'll have to do this again before the end of this year. And I look forward to hearing that you opened up your own training facility.
God, I
Fingers
look
crossed.
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really fun conversation and I had a great time.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Last thing before we go though, social. How do people find you on Instagram? How do they find like maybe your website?
Yeah. Socials, I'm at Rae.wholifts, RAE is how you spell my name. There's also the Ladies Who Lift Instagram page at Ladies Who Lift Official. You can find our website is ladies-who-lift.com. And I'm a pretty easy person to find, and I'm very responsive. I love talking to people. So if any other questions, I'm happy to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rae, and we'll talk soon. You have a great
Thank
rest of your
you so
day.
much. Yeah.
Bye.